Okay. Well, we're on our second Greater Downtown San Jose Economic Recovery Task Force, and I do apologize for anyone that was having some issues being able to log in, and I was having some internet issues myself. We will make sure to try and get everybody an invite the day of. I think we had sent the invite for this meeting on Saturday, so it's probably buried as it was buried in my email for a lot of individuals. But thank you again for joining us on this second meeting. And since the last meeting, as you're aware, you voted on 2 co-chairs to be able to take over and lead the task force. And it's my honor to be able to introduce your co-chairs, the Executive Director of San Jose Taiko, Wisa Uemura, and the owner of Haberdasher, Cash Boren. And they will be supported by 2 alternates in the event that they are unable to fulfill their duties, and that's the owner of Huesca Gym, Megan Carabatsos, and the owner of New to You Thrift Boutique, and the owner of Urban Kiosk, Chris Patterson Simmons. So thank you to all of you for your willingness to serve. And now, without further ado, I'm turning over the meeting to your co-chairs, Wisa and Cash.
Thank you, Council Member. On behalf of Cash and myself, it's a privilege to serve as co-chairs of this task force, an honor that was not expected, but I'm very grateful for, and we'll try to do well by all of you. So moving on very quickly, we're going to do roll call. I'm going to call your names, and then, if you can just say that you're here. Brendan Rawson. Sorry, are you muted? I know you're here. I'm here. Wisa Uemura. Fernanda Carrera.
Here.
Cash Boren.
I'm here.
And for April G today, we have Alicia, correct? I'm not going to pronounce your last name correctly. Sorry.
Orbrick, here.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Chris Patterson Simmons.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Sorry, printing. Megan Carabatsos.
Hi, I'm here.
Thank you. Takahiro Kitamura.
Yep, here.
Laura Chmielewski.
Yes, here.
Sorry about your name. I tried as best as I could.
Oh, it was really good. It was good.
Okay. Blage Zelalic.
Hi, everyone. I'm here. Nice to
Okay.
be here.
So it seems like we're all present as far as the task force members. Thank you all for being here for meeting number 2. We're going to move on quickly to old business. The first action item is basically to approve the May 20th meeting minutes, and the purpose of approving the minutes is to ensure that our meeting is being captured accurately in those notes. I know the D3 staff has had the minutes linked in the agenda and sent out a reminder yesterday, but it was a little bit embedded, so I want to ask if everyone is comfortable, could we approve the meeting minutes? Okay. So then if we're comfortable, if everybody's had a chance to look at it, I did have one very minor correction at the bottom of page 10 on Cash's notes. It was a comment made by Cash that it says that he's recommending we have 4 alternates. He meant to have 2 alternates so that there's representation from all 4 committees. I don't know if that's major enough to warrant a correction on the actual minutes, but I just wanted to bring that to D3 staff's attention. D3 staff, is that you want to make that correction?
If that is okay with Cash, and if that's what he really meant, we'll take that in our notes and make that new reflection. Thank you.
Yep, that's what I meant. Yeah, I was just trying to shoot for equal representation across all of the 4 committees.
Great. Our team is writing that down, and we'll make that correction. Thank you.
Wonderful. Can I ask for someone to make a motion to approve the minutes as amended? I'm sorry. Oh, Chris Simmons is raising her hand. So she's making the motion to, I'm going to assume it doesn't have to be verbal. Can someone second that motion? I can't see everybody.
I saw hands from Fernanda and Brendan and Megan now, so we've got 3 seconds.
Okay. Then all in favor of approving the minutes as amended, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? More important one. Any nays? All right. Any abstentions? Okay. Then the minutes are approved as amended. Thank you for that. As an informational item, I'm going to hand things over back to Councilmember Perales, and he's going to report out on some outstanding questions that were asked last week. The Councilmember, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and finally got my laptop working here. So so we have every meeting. I'll be trying to report back on any follow-up items that the task force has asked from the previous meetings. And the one follow-up item from last week was a question that Fernanda had posed, and the question was about how far, or it was the question was about how far behind, either days or weeks, is the county, our county, Santa Clara County, from the state orders. And we did reach out to the county health official, and according to her office, they are trying to be consistent with the state when certainly when it makes sense, but we are certainly on our own path. And the health officer is closely monitoring and focusing on our specific local data of the 5 key indicators. And you can look that up. There's actually a great summary of that on the county's page for public health, and they talk about the 5 key indicators. Indicator 1 being progress towards the goal that the total number of cases in the community is flat or decreasing. And that is, you know, we've had some days where there's some spikes, like on May 18th. And so that's not necessarily, it has been relatively flat, but not necessarily decreasing. The second or other indicator, progress towards the goal that the number of hospitalized patients with COVID-19 is flat or decreasing, and that is definitely decreasing. Progress towards sufficient hospital capacity to meet the needs of our residents, and that is moving in the right direction. You can look through the rest of that online, but there's these 5 indicators the county is keying in on. But in regards to our comparison to the state orders, there's a few factors that go into play. And initially, as we tried to look at the numbers, we're about 2 weeks or so at best behind the state's orders, and certainly for certain industries, you know, we're well behind. But the 2-week reasoning is because it's due to the 14-day incubation period for COVID-19. And so the virus itself takes that 14 days, as we've all learned, to make its way out of your system. And so our county health official doesn't want to move from one phase to the next, or doesn't want to make major shifts in reopening of the economy until we've completed a 14-day cycle. And so as we make sort of big orders or changes to the order, we're going to see a 2-week lag no matter what before we have any other significant changes, because the county wants to be able to measure what has the last order, what has the impact been on the community before we move to another phase. So that's another one that our county health officer is using, and the state is not exactly following that that process of where they're waiting 14 days to maybe shift on some of these, because again, the state is making a blanket allowance statewide, and then each individual county is actually making those changes within their county. So that's the update we have there.
Thank you, Council Member. Are there any questions, follow-up questions to that? All right. Now we can move on to our main purpose of today's meeting. Last week we spoke about the present conditions in our respective industries. Today we're talking about the future. We're going to try and attempt to talk about the future. In one aspect or another, public health is a critical element in all of our business operations, governed and enforced by several levels of government. There's a lot of uncertainty, and today we hope to learn about what will most likely be expected from each of us in our industries, respective industries, in regards to public health moving forward.
We're going to have three speakers come forward and discuss several issues. But before we begin, I want to share the format for that portion. Each one of these speakers are going to provide about a 5-minute update each on their respective areas of expertise. And afterwards, we're going to open it up for questions and a Q&A session as well as a bit of discussion with all of the task force members. So save all of your questions until all three of the presentations are done. Just write them down, and or you could write them into the chat. And I know Christina will keep an eye on that as well. We're going to open the public comment discussion or public comment section at the end of the task force discussion. So first, we're going to get a chance to discuss, and then we're going to bring in public comment. Just friendly reminders about the house rules. Of course, we're all going to be respectful of each other. Step up and step back. So step up and say your piece, but then also step back so others can speak. Try and stay on topic so we don't get a bit too watered down or distracted. And be mindful of the time, because we all want to respect everyone's time here. We all have a lot of other things to get done today. Okay. So I'm going to introduce all three of the speakers, and then I'm going to hand it off to Lee, who's going to be our first speaker. We have Lee Wilcox. He's the city manager's chief of staff, and he's currently the director of San Jose's Emergency Operations Center. Deputy Chief David Tyndall is with the SJPD, and he oversees the Bureau of Field Operations. He's been the SJPD's law enforcement liaison between city and county. And then Scott Strickland is going to be coming in to join. He's the chief of staff of President and County Supervisor Cindy Chavez. Her supervisory district includes the greater downtown area. Scott's going to be jumping on later in the meeting for a short duration, and he's got a very short amount of time, so we don't want to interrupt him or just let him get his piece out. But and so let's move on to Lee. Go ahead, take over.
Thanks, Cash. And I did want to thank you for all of the Facebook videos of the cone flipping. My daughter and I have been very amused at your skills. I don't know how you do that. So
to be honest with you, I'm not sure either. I'm starting to run out of tricks already.
Yeah, well, we enjoy it in our house, and most importantly, I'm a former downtown manager for the city of San Jose. You guys have moved on to a much better one in Block A, but really appreciate the opportunity to be with the downtown community today. Can you guys go to the next slide? So just wanted to give a little bit of an overview for the purposes of how the city has been kind of reacting to this crisis, and really how we kind of support the county in their role as the lead in public health. So I'm going to do my best to be brief, but we started kind of looking at this really early on in the year as information started to come in from China. Actually, there was an individual that came into my office in January that said, "Hey, I'm really worried about this. We should start thinking through how the city's going to respond." And I said, "Get out of my office. There's like 5 other emergencies going on." And yeah, I mean, you can see within 3 months, this escalated very rapidly. So we put together a framework that you'll see here, but kind of 5 stages that we were stepping into and planning around this crisis, and really 3 crises. And we've also developed how we're going to start stepping down as well, so that we obviously will follow the county and their guidance as our experts in this, but how we start to re-engage, our city workforce, our local economy, and then our own our own fiscal situation in the city. So next slide. One of the things I think that's important for us as a city is that we've talked to our council about the 3 challenges of now. And so obviously we have a public health crisis that we are trying to support the county in their role and our residents and what they need to do, which I'll speak to in a second. But at the same point in time, as we go ahead and implement and respond to this crisis, we knew that we were going to need to take a step back and look at the other 2 imperatives, which is our economic crisis that is happening right now, that will ensue, that I imagine a lot of your questions will be around, and then our own kind of preservation of our fiscal health at the city. We know in helping the economy and helping other people, that our own fiscal health is very dependent on the economic conditions within the city. So we've really been looking at all 3 of these as we've continued to respond and support the county in their role. Next slide. And in supporting the county, what we've really done and what has been kind of our true north is this roadmap. And it's really important, as the county put the shelter in place in order, that if we did that right, that it could be a shorter period of time. So everything that we've been doing thus far has been in support of the county and ensuring that our own residents could shelter in place, and not become COVID-19 affected, and spread it throughout the city. And so to do that, it's been continuing to provide essential city services. We haven't missed a garbage pickup since this all took place. And we've been able to keep police and fire on the streets, to a great extent, and allow people, that we would to provide assurances that we would continue to provide those services. And at the same point in time, there's individuals in our community, our at-risk population, most vulnerable communities, that need additional support, that are obviously down on their luck, because of the economic fallout. At the request of the county, we did pick up kind of a county-wide food and necessity distribution program, that we've been doing on behalf of the county, partnering with dozens of community-based organizations and school districts, providing just shy of about 2.8 million meals a week. And delivering those to those people at home so they can shelter in place, and then ramping up our homeless support, and services, and beginning to start thinking through local assistance, not only for our residents that need to shelter in place, but starting the planning process for what does small business and nonprofit support look like in the near term. And a lot of that will be rolling out in the next few days. Next slide. And one thing I think is important is as especially as frustration grows with the shelter in place order, the significance of it and the fact that it has worked. This is a slide that's a little old, but is if we can all remember back to February or March, when the first cases started to get report in, Santa Clara County was really a hotbed for this disease. And as you can see now, as we sheltered in place very quickly, the larger circles are kind of where this is happening on a per capita basis, and to a great effect. So you can see some of our major urban areas throughout the US have huge numbers versus Santa Clara's has really declined. And so that, the shelter in place order has been really effective. Next slide. As we at the city continue planning for what's next, I'm sorry, the slide here, that first scenario is called a slow burn. We're really trying to understand from the county, and I think the county's trying to understand this as well, as what may happen to the virus, and when can we start opening stuff up, but also how do we plan for, if things spike, how we continue to operate in our emergency operations center. So, to the best of our ability, we've partnered with the county to understand and get access to the data they have, and use that dashboard to really effectively kind of figure out into the fall and the winter what this looks like. Next slide. And so as we've done that, we've put together another 5 stages. So this is kind of stepping out of the shelter in place for ourselves and really our emergency operations center. And again, this is how the city is approaching it, in support of the county and how we would take county direction, but are looking at how we slowly start to step out of this. And unfortunately, while stages 1 through 5 happen very, very quickly, stages 6 through 10 are gonna take some time. And so the creativity that the city has, as we work with our local businesses to ensure their prosperity and get people back to work, is going to be more complicated, but it's something that we're committed to doing and better understanding. And then last slide for me is, one of the important things is, the federal government is in a good position to continue to help people. The state budget is kind of in shambles at this point in time. Our own budget is going to be quite constrained. So we've been relentless on pursuing additional funding at the federal level through, the CARES Act that I'm sure some of you have heard, and the Paycheck Protection Program, and now there's a 4th bill, the HEROES Act. So we continue to be very aggressive on that front, not only for money to fight the health crisis, but money to help jumpstart our economy and help small business, nonprofits, and individuals step out of this. And so this is something that we report on to our mayor and council on a continuous basis, but something that we're being relentless and putting a lot of resources in. And with that, I think I'm done, and I'll hand it over to Chief Tyndall.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to be here and to speak and answer questions. So I'll give a little bit of background, number one, on what I oversee, and then just some of the things that the police department has done, is doing, and continues to do. So just from an introduction standpoint, so I'm the deputy chief over the Bureau of Field Operations. And so BFO, Bureau of Field Operations, is comprised of roughly 1,000 men and women, civilian and sworn, that include all of patrol officers or special operations or CSOs and the various community-based liaison groups that work through BFO. The police department has continued to be fully operational since day one of the pandemic, and much before and probably much after. And our mission has always been in building strong community partnerships, with the community and taking the criminal element off the street. And I can assure you this continues as we move forward here. And my main priority, and the main priority always in BFO, is a response to 911 calls, so that the police officers will be there when you call 911. So some things that we did internally and externally from the standpoint of the police department. From our own standpoint, since there was no break in work or the ability to work from home or the ability to, kind of change the way we do things from a response perspective, some things that we did internally was decentralized briefings. So we, at any one time, we have 3 per day where all of our patrol officers would get together. And it's where we hand out information, make sure everybody's here, talk about things that are going on. So one of the main things that we did right off the bat in response to what we're hearing was going on was to decentralize that. And so it pushed all of our patrol officers out in the streets where they meet with their sergeants, and that's where they're disseminated information in much smaller groups, and kind of a workplace social distancing, if you will, not held in our main building here downtown. And then from a proactive standpoint, we had to ensure that we had maintained a safe workspace, more robust cleaning internally, more workplace distancing, updated protocols when dealing with residents and calls for service, and what that model looked like when we were responding out to calls and dealing with the public. A lot of that was definitely educational in standpoint. And then making sure that our men and women had the proper PPEs for any situation, the proper decontamination techniques available to them, and certainly the education so that they knew how to, everything from donning and doffing to, what do we do with a potential exposure. I can proudly say that from these measures to date, I can count all of our COVID positives on one hand, and that is from 1,000 employees who've been working since day one, and none of which can be attributed to either the workplace or from a call for service, which is astounding in itself. I think from a crime perspective, we externally, we call them Part 1 crimes, but we report out to Department of Justice. And in our Part 1 crimes, we're seeing since day one of the pandemic, when we go back and compare that to the same time last year, are reporting out to DOJ on these Part 1 crimes, we're seeing much lower rates of crime, which we will absolutely contribute to COVID-19 and people being home. Somewhere's up in the space of 20 and 30% reductions. However, we certainly did, and I know that many of the business owners downtown, and we started moving or repurposing units to be down there, saw an uptick in commercial burglaries and even in school burglaries, and a lot of businesses that were, for the most part, vacant while the shelter in place was on and continues, was something that we kind of had to adjust and work towards as far as addressing those. As many of you are aware, we put together established health order compliance cars. And in this, the main focus was the education and at times enforcement, but in early days, enforcement was reserved for more blatant disregard. What we found from the numerous contacts we made was that it only took one visit by PD to combine and talk and educate. And, we would go back and we'd list all these businesses and go back and do a return visit, and found most of them to be completely compliant. And I will say since that March, I think it was March 17th date that we used kind of a starting date, we've had over 2,800 or 2,800 contacts with businesses in compliance type venues. And I would say that's probably a low number, and that is just from the compliance cars alone. Certainly our patrol staff was out doing stuff that is not captured in those numbers. So as you can see, it was certainly a fairly high number from in the last couple of months from the police department going out and doing compliance checks and seeing what is going on there. And again, with the education. You know, as we move forward and as Lee talks about the phased recovery and the phased approach and what that looks like, we continue to work through those different phases and through the recovery phase. And again, it just holds still that our duties to keep our residents safe, our community safe, both from the criminal element on the streets and then also from a safety standpoint and anything we can do. So that's all I really have at this point. I look forward to the questions and comments from anybody who's on here. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Tyndall. Doesn't look like Scott's here yet. So we're gonna go ahead and open up the discussion to the panel here, the task force panel. And then when Scott does arrive, we're gonna turn it over to him so he can say his piece. All right, so.
If I can insert as people decide to raise their hands. So we were shared a summary, like a top sheet of all the questions that our various committees generated. It was a very succinct summary of many common themes that came up amongst the questions. You can ask questions from that list, or you can also go back to your committee's individual questions if you want more specificity. We'll do that, and then as Cash said, whenever Scott shows up, we'll switch over back to his presentation. So if you please raise your hand if you
use the raise hand feature and we'll open it up now. Go ahead. All right, a lot of action. There we go. Taki.
Thanks. Yeah, I just had a question. Deputy Chief, you said that you guys are going around citing people. So are you the? I guess I've had some of the people that I represent ask like what like I guess essentially if they open up, what happens? You come down, you get cited. Obviously, part of it, there's a bitterness seeing that, like, you know, for example, people break into the same Japantown business 3 times and they keep getting released. So I'm just kind of curious, like, what happens? And earlier too, we were discussing the Elon Musk situation. So, you know, if you have enough money, you can break the county ordinance. Like, I'm just curious, like, what is the penalty if a business doesn't comply?
So I can't necessarily speak because a lot of that actually goes through and realistically from the citation standpoint. So I will say, as far as the citations that we've issued, I want to say out of the 2,800 contacts from the health order, we have cited, I think, 4 people from a citation standpoint. So look, and again, from 2,800, that is a low number as far as the actual contacts we've had on this. A lot of what we've done, and again, those citations were from businesses that, number one, were initially contacted from an educational standpoint and then refused to comply, and then the citation was issued. As far as where it goes now, the citation itself is considered a misdemeanor. It's, I think, a minimum of $50 and up to $1,000, and then it can hold up to 90 days in jail. We certainly don't have any control over, number one, a district attorney filing on that and or what the courts would do with that. I think you're seeing from a national level that there is a lot of disagreement on how that will roll down. And again, that's really not our, our stance is just to respond out. What I will tell you, we have certainly done a lot of documentation. So while we may not cite, we have done police reports that we forward to the district attorney's office, and that's called a DA review or district attorney review. And as I said before, our main goal here is to get compliance on the health order. There are certain things that, even in the health order itself, there's certain ambiguity to it, depending on who you ask, and even the words on there can be open interpretation. So again, from our standpoint, it was definitely more of a proactive approach to educate, to talk to the community, and a lot of the things that we ended up doing, all of our officers have the literature and the documentation from the county to hand out, and or we have numbers that we can go back to the county to ask them specific questions with their county counsel, with their legal representation on whether they're exempt, whether they're not exempt, and what they can do. So a lot of that is, the first response, but it doesn't end there with the police department. A lot of that is both the education and the essentially finding out where the question that is being posed might be best answered.
Okay, thank you, Chief Tyndall. We've got Scott on. Again, he's the Chief of Staff of President and County Supervisor Cindy Chavez. Scott, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for the excellent questions that you sent beforehand. And I'll try to respond to as many as we can. Some of them are unfortunately unknowable, but we do have some answers. Let me just start with tracing the way the county's health order works. Our shelter in place is a result of two orders, a state public health order and a county public health order. The county public health order comes from an appointed official, Dr. Sarah Cody, who is the county's public health officer. By law, it does not come from elected officials, like for example, the Board of Supervisors. Between the state order and the county order, the more strict order, the more restrictive order applies to every situation. So in our community, we're mostly looking at the county's public health order because it's more strict on in just about every aspect. I think that we're more relaxed on golf than the state order, but everything else, the county order is more strict. The county health officer is working in concert with the public health officers of the 5 other most populous counties in the Bay Area, so that the Bay Area is mostly working in lockstep with some small exceptions between the counties, but basically Marin, San Francisco, San Mateo, Santa Clara, Oakland, and Contra Costa are acting generally as one. This is in those counties. The Bay Area has a population that's bigger than 33 of the United States. So this is kind of the equivalent of a governor making the decision in a smaller state. Hang on a second. The current order that we're under expires on Sunday night, and so I am certain, but do not know, but I'm pretty certain that there's going to be an extension of that order by the public health officer. It'll come out probably, I would guess, tomorrow or Friday. I'm pretty sure that will extend the shelter in place generally, but will relax some aspects of it. We don't know quite yet what those are. How can you get information? I would refer you to the county's COVID website, which you can, if you Google SCC COVID order, you'll get there. I think it's the first one listed with those search terms, SCC COVID order. And that has 3 important pieces of information. One is it has the orders, but it also has the FAQs. And I noticed questions that are poised for specific industries, very specific questions. When the public health officer puts out an order, they can't anticipate every application. And so they often make interpretations or changes in the weeks between the orders that apply very narrowly. For example, if you look on the FAQs, which are kind of unwieldy because you got to scroll through them all, you'll find like specific directions for flower shops and quarries, which are 2 businesses that didn't immediately spring to my mind, but we have special orders for them. So the FAQs is the first place to start. Secondly, there's a series of 4 data dashboards, and the dashboards show cases and deaths. They show hospitalizations and available ICU beds and available ventilators. They also show the the progress, the testing that's been going on, and what the results are of testing in Santa Clara County. And then finally, a specific dashboard for long-term care facilities such as nursing homes, which is a pretty sobering one. And then there's another page which is called the 5 indicators. And these are the 5 indicators that the public health officer is looking at in order to decide how quickly to reopen the society from the shelter in place. And if you look at those indicators on the top 3, we're doing very, very well. We're doing very well at flattening the curve. Unfortunately, we've had about 40 new cases in each of the last 3 days. Before that, for a couple of weeks, it had been about 15 new cases a day. But generally, we're doing a good job of flattening the curve. We're doing a good job of making sure that we have enough hospitalization capacity to handle a surge so that we don't have an Italy situation or a New York situation. And we're doing a pretty good job of getting personal protective equipment available for our health workers. That's not enough PPE for everybody or for businesses, for example, but for the people that are actually in the hospitals, we've got enough. So those are all like green lights. And then we have testing. We've doubled our testing capacity from probably quadrupled it in 3 weeks, but doubled it in the last week. But our health officer wants us to be able to test 4,000 people a day. We're up to about a capacity of about 2,000 a day, about halfway there. And then finally, we have to be able, she says we need to be able to have a contact tracing capacity of a certain size. And we're standing that up now. It's nowhere near ready. There was as noted in a press report, we're looking to stand that up. So we're probably a couple of weeks away from that being viable in a very, very large scale that we would require in the county. There's of course the question of there's a tension about how soon we should reopen various sectors of society. The prevailing thought here is that we need to be cautiously reopening our society. That on May 4th, we opened up the construction industry and we opened up outdoor businesses such as nurseries. To our knowledge, we haven't seen a big spike in cases because of those openings. We've just opened up curbside retail, and we're awaiting the results on that. But it's hard to imagine that would prove to be really unsafe. There's a tension right now between the public health officers who are very, very cautious and other folks in society who are thinking, gosh, there are some very safe and sane measures that we can take to open more of our economy without putting all of us at risk. So right now, Cindy is preparing 2 public hearings in the next 10 days or so, in which various industries, sectors will show what they have been doing if they've been allowed to open, or how they would open and still keep everybody safe. And we've been working with various industry sectors in helping them craft protocols and presenting them to the public health officer. Supervisor Dave Cortese, who has a lot of experience in regional government, has also been working with supervisors in other Bay Area counties to present these protocols to their health officers as well. So Cindy is hoping that by giving the public, the media, and the public health officer the information about how we can safely open certain businesses certain extents that that the public health officer will find it safe to reopen more of the economy. So stay tuned for that. And with that, I'm available to take some questions.
As a matter of fact, we're reopening basically for the entire task force to ask their questions. So any of you that had your hand raised earlier, we can go ahead and take your questions and comments.
I think Fernanda has her hand up, and then Alicia.
Thank you.
Yeah, I had a question for Deputy Chief Tyndall. I think some of my committee members had some concerns about how to enforce when we do actually open. If we have some customers who just refuse to follow guidelines and are being a little bit belligerent coming into our business. I know we have the right to refuse business to anyone, but they wanted to know at what point in time do they cross the line to where we have to make a call to 911, or is it 911 that we call, or are you going to set up a different line that we should call for those kind of things, as well as some committee members had concerns with their patios, people coming in and just staying and being belligerent about being there. They wanted to find out, when do they call 911? At what point can we enforce some of these guidelines ourselves?
So the answer to that, and I'll answer that in a kind of a roundabout way. So as far as the response to somebody not wearing a mask, so for example, just to begin with, somebody walking down the street, or let's say somebody goes inside a store, if a call is made to the police department and it is solely for the purpose of someone who is not wearing a mask and is with nothing else attached to it, at that point, our call taker would certainly receive the call. Information would be garnered from that, but most likely there would not be a police response for that. As I'm sure you are all well aware, our bandwidth to essentially send officers to something like that, taking them out of the system, whereby they cannot answer 911 calls and respond to emergency calls for service, would make that so that from our standpoint, it'd be very hard to do. The other portion of that would trigger a response from police is if there's some underlying crime that's associated with it. Now, to the point, what is that underlying crime? That could be something as simple as somebody comes on your premise, they sit down to eat, they refuse to wear a mask, which again, outside of guidelines, and also I would imagine probably outside of what your internal protocol is, both for your employees and for patrons there. That now triggers a certain other portion of it, which could be a trespassing call. It could be a disturbance type call where someone is being belligerent, or some other crime, and hopefully it wouldn't rise to this, but let's say an assault and battery call. So any of those ones where, let's say, its initial response to it was involving the mask, but then it then moves on to a criminal element, which is trespassing, disturbance, any one of those ones, there would certainly be a police response, and we would take action based on that, and not just the mask itself. So as far as who you would call, I mean, certainly if you go the non-emergency route, it could certainly be a delay in reporting it, and certainly we would not like things to escalate from that standpoint. If you feel that it's a public safety situation, belligerent to the point that it could probably move forward and become a disturbance and or a battery, something like that, you would certainly call 911 in that instance, and we would respond.
Thank you.
All right, I guess I'm up. This is a question for Scott. Scott, you mentioned that PPE supplies is doing pretty well, at least for hospitals. But a lot of the retailers throughout San Jose are worried that they cannot get the supplies in order to keep their facilities safe, hand sanitizer, masks, gloves, and so forth. Is there any plan or any resources for retailers to get what they need? A lot of us have experienced not being able to get any of the supplies that we need, at least in a timely manner.
There's not a plan as of right now, but it's something that we're actually exploring at our hearings next week, because we're asking the businesses to participate to ask what they need from all levels of government in order to reopen safely, including, waivers from inspections or expedited inspections. PPE would be something natural, but we've just been focusing on the medical grade PPE for the health workers, and so we haven't yet moved on to the question of the everyday PPE.
Brendan, go ahead. I can't hear. Can anyone hear him?
You're unmuted, but I can't hear you.
Yeah, Brendan, I'm having a hard time hearing you. You don't look muted, but can't hear anything.
Brendan did type his question, so I'll read it off. He said, how can industries such as ours come forward with specific plans for safe questions? How do we get such plans approved?
And I would just add that the industries that he's representing is arts and special events.
Let me take a crack at that. We will at our hearings in the next week and a half include an arts and entertainment sector. However, there's such a disparity between the safety protocols that you would need in each one of those, in all aspects. It would be really helpful if people could present their proposed protocols to us. Like, for example, movie theaters and jazz festivals, which are, a long way off, have their own protocols. A museum, for example, would have a much different protocol. So what we've been doing is accepting people's protocols, helping them rewrite them so that they have the best chance of being accepted by the public health officer. And then we've actually been presenting them, our office has been presenting them to the public health officer. So feel free to work directly with us if you have a fairly narrow set of protocols.
Yeah, and this is Lee from the city. I would just jump in, kind of in the spirit of, trying to help here. I think, like the Elon Musk question was a good question. We haven't necessarily found ourselves in that role that much of needing to enforce on a business. In many ways, it's been trying to obviously support the county and what Scott just walked through, but also just come to the reality that we need to be able to facilitate some of this work in the new reality. So, we've moved to like a lot of, as construction was able to come back online, move a lot of that approval process to, virtual building inspections and approval. And so I think, within the downtown community, whether it's arts or cultural or the entertainment industry, there's a host of questions out there related to, your occupancy, the social distancing and everything else. And I know like our Office of Economic Development, as we step into the economic recovery phase, we'll start to think through industry by industry and, support and get a better understanding from the county of what is appropriate through public health, and then facilitate that through, across the industry to ensure that you guys have the proper resources and kind of rules, knowledge of the rules to operate safely and efficiently.
Thank you, Lee.
And Scott, sorry, Cash, before you move on, I just wanted to see, Scott, do you have the dates as Blage was mentioning, and is it possible for members of this task force to participate in those hearings that Supervisor Chavez is hosting?
Yes, and I think that I know a couple folks that you've been working on are already scheduled for that for participation in the hearing. But the Blage's had a very important question, but they're all being unfortunately we had them scheduled yesterday until about 4:55, and then they became unscheduled. So we're rescheduling. And as soon as I have that information, I'll send it to your office council member, to David, and for your dissemination.
I have a question. So how long before we're going to open, like I have a restaurant, are we going to receive the protocols and the guidelines of what's expected? And how much time are we going to have to get our places ready for that? Is there an idea of when that's going to come down the line?
There is not. We don't know. Now, what we're hoping for is that we'll have a messy opening and not a chaotic opening.
And also, I noticed that like Napa and Sonoma opened up for dining, but they're dining outside only. Is that something that we're going to probably do as well, or did I misunderstand that part?
No, the city is exploring that, and Blog A probably knows more about that program and how the city may step into it.
Sorry, I'm on mute. Yeah, so we are right now having all the conversations around a potential SJ Alfresco program when the county gives us the green light to either operate for restaurants to operate on premise for on-premise dining, and or if the county just says you can do dining, but it all has to be outside, right? So the goal would be to try to get restaurants to as close as their quote unquote normal capacity as possible. And so we're looking at the variety of ways that we can use both public and private property. So sidewalks, parking spaces, potentially streets, and private parking lots or other paved lots where you might have a shopping center scenario or a multi-tenant scenario. Looking at how we can streamline the process, how we can reduce or waive the fees completely, and how we can kind of process whatever the procedure needs to be in order to make sure that it's safe and it makes sense for the public and for businesses as quickly as possible. So we are trying, it's a little bit difficult when we don't know exactly what the timeline is for the county to adjust the order, but we're having meetings every day, every other day on what a program might look like for both public and private property so that we're ready when we have the green light, and we can easily adjust it depending on what restrictions are lifted and what parameters are in place.
On jumping on that, is that something that we're able to communicate to restaurants there, at least that the effort is being made? I mean, besides through regular websites, it's a question that I'm getting from a lot of fellow business owners is what's going on, when is it happening? And I tell them what I know, but I don't really have a source to point them to that's kind of reporting on the progress. Many of them are feeling frustrated and saying, well, nothing's going to happen in time, and those kinds of things. So I'd like to be able to point them in a direction.
Yeah, I mean, I think cash for the businesses downtown, the Downtown Association is the best conduit. I mean, I'm working really closely with them. Yeah. I am in the process of, the city has 9 or 10 kind of neighborhood business districts, commercial business districts that were established in redevelopment agency times. And so a lot of those folks along the Alameda, Willow Glen, Japantown, East Santa Clara, I mean, a number of you kind of represent, those associations, so to speak. And so I'm in the process of reaching out to all of the kind of overarching organizations to try to create some structure so that we can quickly get input and feedback from businesses a la these organizations' members. So like, for instance, I just talked with Nate yesterday and he gave me a rundown of all the conversations that were happening at the Historic District, the San Pedro, and the SOFA District neighborhood committee meetings. So, and feel free to have anybody reach out to me. At this point, we're just trying to go quickly. And so I think it's unrealistic to say we're going to be able to, and things are moving so quickly and we're trying to figure out what a program might look like. I think it's unrealistic to say that we're going to be able to provide like a website and have updates there or anything like that. I think it's all just happening so quickly. But feel free to reach out to me. Feel free to obviously reach out to the Downtown Association. we can take questions through this task force as well. So hopefully
If
that's...
if I could just add on two quick things. One in response to Fernanda's question. If I had a restaurant, I would be looking at figuring out how to do outdoor dining, and I would also be looking at how to do reduced capacity indoor dining, how I could reconfigure for a smaller, not full capacity. So people could be eating inside with some social distancing, because those are options that may be coming down the line before we get to, hey, it's back to pre-COVID. Secondly, yesterday the Board of Supervisors voted to explore Cindy's suggestion to actually put 100 to 200 maybe community workers on the street. Would be health educators essentially to primarily in East San Jose, where we're having the toughest impact and apparently the lowest levels of compliance with a health order, to make sure that everybody, all the businesses and individuals, really understand what you can do, what you can't do, how to make yourself and your community safer. So on the public education front, and I agree with Blage that we're just going to be, things are moving so quickly, we're just going to always be behind the curve on it, but doing the best we can, that's another factor. And with that, I'm going to have to go. I just wanted to thank Councilmember Perales for inviting us to participate. Always happy to support you in what you're doing. And also give a shout out to Lee Wilcox, who for his service in the Emergency Operations Center, which is a very, very tough environment. And we'll appreciate it.
Excellent.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks for your work.
Appreciate you participating. Yep. We have one last question we're going to end this section with. That's going to be you, Chris. But before we do, just wanted to note, Christina Ramos is going to be keeping an eye on any of the questions that you raise in chat, and that's something she's going to be following back up with you on, so that we can continue to move this forward time-wise. But Chris Simmons, you had your hand raised. Please, you're going to be our last question of this segment.
Well, thank you, Cash, but Scott's gone now. My question was for Cash. How are retailers going to be able to get the information on what we need far as opening, signage, and like that? Because I received public health information by another person, and talking with a few of the committee before we started this Zoom, they were sharing with me only certain people were getting that information. And so how is everybody going to be able to operate on the same page if they're not getting the information that they need? And I'm a retailer, and also I have an open space property, so I need to know who's going to get me this information. That was my question, I think, for Scott. But if Leland can answer, that's excellent. If anybody can answer, that would be great. I appreciate it. Thank you.
I can take a shot at it. I didn't realize it said Leland on the Zoom. As soon as I hear that name, I think I'm in trouble. So maybe this is a bad question. I think, to Scott's credit, he did a really good job of trying to answer some of these questions. And we get to be in communication with the county every single day. And I think, typically the city is more in a role to try and jumpstart or support the economy. Obviously, like Blage's position exists for a reason. The Downtown Association exists for a reason to kind of support that work. So we're constantly trying to get that information from the county as well, so that we can package it better together through Blage or a variety of other people that work in different sectors, so that we're making it easier on you guys. So as you reopen, and Scott's credit, or in his defense, they're trying to write the rules as they're trying to figure out when things open and when things don't. So trying to do both of those things at the same time isn't the easiest in the world. So I think, that's where, you guys shouldn't care whether it's a county or a city function. And I think that's one of the areas where we just need to kind of step into. And once we have the information from the county, do a better job of sharing it with you guys. But again, we can't do that until the county has really given an indication on that. And so we're trying to do things and bear some of the burden from them so that they can focus on those things so we can get it out. But again, as Scott mentioned, just as it looks like we're flattening the curve, we have a rise in cases and that they need to go do that. So unfortunately, you know, it's to be determined when we'll get you that information, but it is the city's point as we kind of step into economic recovery to make it easier on you guys with, you know, kind of putting all of that information together into one spot eventually, so that you can just read one thing and then go do what you guys do best, which is run your business. But we are a ways from that at this point, unfortunately.
And if I could just interject really quickly, thanks Lee for that. The other thing that we are doing in the Office of Economic Development is we've just revamped our website, and it's not, a lot of it initially was very kind of reactionary to kind of COVID information, you know, resources for business and all of that. And it was a lot of information coming to people, you know, all at once and pretty rapidly. So we've sjeconomy.com, we've redone our economic development website, and we're trying to make it more user-friendly. And on there, we have things like, you know, the social distancing guidelines, and we'll be putting up, the city has created a few kind of posters talking about social and physical distancing. And so we will be kind of posting that information and having that information available for folks, pushing it out through our flash reports. But at the same time, you can kind of check out and check back on sjeconomy.com.
Thank you. Thank you, panelists, and also thank our task force members and also our guest speakers. We're going to move on to public comment section. So we want to invite anyone from the public to comment on anything relevant to this particular body. In your Zoom toolbar, we ask that you click the raise hand feature, and once you do, the District 3 staff will call on you one by one and unmute you. So please accept the unmute. In the interest of time, we think we can allocate 2 minutes per person to speak. However, if the answers start becoming too long, we might have to encourage you to use the Q&A feature that's also available in Zoom. So I'm going to hand it over to Mindy Nguyen from the District 3 team to begin.
Hey, hi everyone. So now we'll be in the public comment portion. So if there's anyone in the attendees list that would like to ask a question, please raise your hand now and I'll unmute you.
Just co-chairs, we've answered a lot of questions in the Q&A. They were just very general and repeats of the presentations. So if the task force has any more questions, we can probably take them as well.
Perfect. So yeah, going back to our task force members, I think Chris, is that still the same hand or new hand, please?
Oh, it's a new hand though, but I wanted to allow someone else that hadn't asked a question. I think April chimed in, so by all means, April, if you wanted to ask a question, I could yield that to you. I saw her. Is she on?
It might be Alicia or April. No?
I'm on. Hello?
There you are. Okay.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Oh yeah, I just thought, shouldn't the availability of effective treatments be part of the reopening criteria? Because I know people think that's a long way off, but there's actually some antibody treatments that are being tested right now. And like a San Francisco-based group just got 3 independent labs to verify that their antibodies work. So now they're on to hamsters, and then they're going to be doing human trials. But I think, yeah, I think they're thinking like August or September at the earliest. But I think that should be part of the criteria if they can beat certain situations. You know, I think a lot of the public would feel comfortable going out and being part of society again if they know that they're definitely not going to die. You know,
it's coming up in a few months.
Sorry. Anyway, that's all I want to say.
Thanks, April. Taki, I think I saw you raising your hand.
Yeah, and just, obviously respectfully, I'd also like to add that I wouldn't want to tie our opening to any treatment, because that could also never happen. So I think we have to go with, obviously, if something, like if the Chinese release a cure tomorrow, great, we'll buy it. But in the event that it doesn't, I think we should proceed as if there isn't a cure coming, because we don't know that. It could never happen. So I just think that's a really dangerous thing to tie economic development to science, which may or may not ever happen.
I did have a question. Lee, when you were going over the different slides, one of them was the hotspots map, where we were discussing how we're no longer one of the larger air concentrations. It seemed kind of outdated. I saw the date on it was showing April 13th. It said as of April 13th. Is there any more current info regarding this?
Yeah, and I apologize, I couldn't find an updated kind of graphic for it. I can tell you that at least off of the data as of this past weekend, the areas in California, especially within the San Francisco Bay Area, those circles continue to be smaller, and they're larger areas like in Idaho and some of the East Coast, where things have started to open up. And as testing continues to ramp up, those continue to get larger and larger. So, I think, to the two earlier points, we can't shelter in place forever. And I do think, a cure is actually quite a ways off. I know some of the antibody testing that's been reported out is good, but, this is a coronavirus, which, my understanding is the common cold is one, and we yet don't have a cure for that. Scott mentioned what the county's working on, which is a testing, tracing, and isolation program, and that is going to be really the most effective thing that we can do to start to step out of it, so we can, start to jumpstart the economy and do that work slowly, and then hopefully once a cure is in place, it becomes much easier. But again, I know from the city standpoint, as we follow the county, we are definitely continuing to look at the data on this slide, and the sound approach by the CDC and Dr. Sarah Cody at this point has been a testing, tracing, isolation program. So we're really going to follow that methodology to try and restart our local economy.
Okay, thank you, Lee. Chief Tyndall, I had one for you as well, and it's only because being physically present in downtown and watching other people's businesses. To be honest with you, I've chased several shady-looking characters off the stoops of neighboring businesses in both SoFa and in the greater downtown area. Just wondering if you guys have kind of patrol routes so that there is a bit of more of a presence, not necessarily stopping all the time, but just being present, because I see a lot more folks that seem unsavory just being around downtown and the surrounding areas to downtown, Japantown, down the Alameda, things like that, or areas like that. That is.
Sure. So as we've always had, like I said, there's been no cut in services, or at least police patrols, as far as being out there. So our normal patrol staff still continue to be out there. Specific to downtown, we certainly did repurpose the downtown services unit. So they're the ones that normally are the ones that staff the nighttime, nightclubs, and you'll see them downtown a lot. We actually changed their hours and days with a real focal point on being down there. But one thing with as this pandemic cut off is, essential employees, non-essential employees. A lot of the things that we were doing before, as we know, services that were done as far as, whether it be abatements or outreach or any of those things, those for the most part were stalled out. And so a lot of what we're seeing are, programs that we had out there before, where outreach was being done, is just not right now until those services come back up. So certainly from a law enforcement standpoint, we certainly see some of the things, but it generally gets back to what is enforceable and what is not. And as we know, being either, whether it be homeless or unhoused or being out there, is not necessarily a crime related to it. So it's always a little touch and go and hard for us to do. Is there a crime related to it? Certainly from a patrol standpoint, and I would absolutely say if you're seeing anything that looked crime related or something that you feel that police should come, certainly call us and we will come out. and respond to that. But again, it's a fine line with what we're doing, and we certainly know that as this recovery portion pushes forward, there is a lot of work that needs to be done to catch up from a maintenance level on where we were before and to get that back in. So we're certainly cognizant of that and certainly working towards it.
Okay, thank you, Chief Tyndall. Lisa, you had your hand up?
Yes, as a representative of the arts and special events industry, but I think it has repercussions for everybody else. We were wondering, what is the guidance or process on how to set new occupancies for our facilities and our outdoor spaces, given the social distancing? And it's okay if people, I mean, that might have been a question more for Scott, but anybody on the panel or from our guest speakers can take a shot.
I would just say, I think that's probably one of those things, Lisa, where like I think we're waiting from the county on some of the public health expertise, and then for us as the city to kind of interpret that for, like, in, you know, just as he said, you know, reducing inside occupancy for restaurants. I would think, you know, in the special event place for, you know, like a lot of the events you've produced with our Office of Cultural Affairs and special events, that they will also have some kind of guidance at some point in time where they start to work with you on what those events could look like in the new reality. But before we get back to kind of the post-vaccine world that's been mentioned. So I'd say it's TBD, but I do think that's going to be one important part, whether it's inside or outside events that we need to get to.
I'll add in real quick to the occupancies that we currently have are more from a fire safety standpoint, and certainly not right from the standpoint of a social distancing measures. And so you may see an occupancy of a couple hundred in, say, for instance, a nightclub in downtown. But now all of a sudden, if you want to keep people, you know, a large distance apart, you can't necessarily just say, hey, cut your capacity in half down to 150. It's really got to be, it's a whole new operation. It's, you know, ways to separate people. So I think, and certainly I think where this is going to matter is not just even industry specific, but it's going to be venue specific, right? To each individual venue to say, look, sure, you can cut the occupancy down in half, but in order for me to safely keep people separated, it may even be much less.
I think I see Brendan was next.
Sure, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Right on, cool, thanks. Yeah, I guess I wanted to kind of ask about in terms of around the recovery sort of direction and how we're starting to hopefully see some pathways forward for different businesses and operations. The downtown has just been decimated, right? The EDD on Friday, I think it issued, you know, what was the job loss numbers for our region, which was like 79,000, and more than 50% of that was in, you know, hospitality, leisure, you know, entertainment, arts sort of thing. It's just, we've been absolutely clobbered. And we understand that, you know, everybody across the region and all sorts of industries have been hurting, but we're taking it really on the chin. And it hasn't been really clear of how the county and the city maybe are prioritizing the recovery of our sector. I'm kind of curious about, Lee, if you're seeing opportunities with respect to going after potential federal support that maybe could help our venues, you know, update their restrooms to be touchless, or, you know, our marketing strategies of public information about public health and the downtown as a safe and environment. Or even, I don't know if the council member or others of, you know, the mayor had that region-wide initiative. Are they aware of how this impacts for downtown? Are they prioritizing the recovery of downtown? Is there a way that we can make sure they understand that this impact?
They're not, but we are. And I have been in conversation with the mayor already about this task force and ensuring that we can sync up. And in fact, have also been in conversation with the vice mayor, who has an ongoing city-led small business task force that is citywide, and also wanting to sync up to whether it's have a couple of you be able to participate. They meet once a month, be able to participate and share the information that we've been discussing here, and vice versa. Talked about inviting them and some of their members to be able to participate with what we're doing here. And the idea would be just to sync up those efforts, knowing that we are geographically focused, and we're gonna be able to have a narrow focus on this geographic area. But we want to be able to be lockstep with what the mayor and their task force is doing when we go and try to put forth recommendations or lobby at the county level, say.
And then Brendan, I would just add, I think, the city did receive a large deposit of money from the federal government as part of the CARES Act, and for us, it's called the Coronavirus Relief Fund. That funding mechanism is largely kind of scoped on our response to the public health crisis. But with that said, a small portion of it kind of related to local recovery is allowable. So we're going to be putting out some memos later today to manager's budget addendum. It kind of amends our budget, and we will be trying to jumpstart some of the local assistance work within the Emergency Operations Center for small business, but also our nonprofit community. Especially, we're going to be taking some of the TOT projections down that we had in our budget, which obviously the arts community is very dependent and a big driver of the TOT. So there'll be some small changes. I will say that one of the things that we're advocating for very strongly in the HEROES Act is not just money for testing and tracing, but have the HEROES Act be more focused on the recovery process versus the response, or at least allow a greater flexibility based off of where each state is at, so that we can focus some of those funding towards what you're talking about. So it is definitely part of an advocacy strategy that we continue to hammer on. But as you see in the news, the White House, Senate, and House are very divided on that topic, and just in general these days. So it's, I don't know where that'll go, but I'm hopeful this summer that the president does sign some type of relief effort that would allow us to do exactly what you're talking about.
Sounds great. Thank you, Lee. That's encouraging to hear. I appreciate that you guys are looking at it like that. When you were describing the current allotment of funding, it's really geared towards how responding to the crisis in the moment. And I guess one of the things I'm wondering from a cultural organization perspective, we hear that that the testing isn't happening anywhere near at the capacity that's available for it, and the contact tracing is not anywhere near ramped up of what it intended to be. And we're not reaching the communities, the Vietnamese, Latino communities that are primary concern. And it just seems to me it's cultural organizations. This is exactly what we do. It's exactly what we do. And the idea that we haven't really been engaged around those communication strategies is leaves us scratching our head. We're not sure. We're wanting to plug in through things like this task force or other mechanisms. But, I think even within the broader hospitality and leisure sector, as you said, 50,000 some odd jobs that are out, there's got to be a few people that could do some contact tracing. They're good working with people. They work frontline and, best restaurant, bar service, those types of things. So just thinking as the immediate issue that we could also be of assistance.
Yeah, I think you bring up a great point. One of the points we've been trying to make with the county as they figure out this testing and tracing is the tracing program is actually heavily dependent on people that know our community. And, we don't need to bring in a ton of new people. We have people that are part of our community that are unemployed right now that be doing this work. And just as you pointed out, we have a lot of CBOs that know our community inside and out. So why wouldn't we rely on that sector? So that kind of continues one of the things that we continue to communicate. And from what I understand, I think the county's been open to that.
Okay, we've got two last questions. We're going to wrap up with Laura and Chris's questions, and then it's going to be about time to adjourn. So, Laura, please go ahead.
This is actually, and I'm commenting on Brendan's question. And just so you're aware, clearly we've had massive layoffs, and in both the theaters and the convention center, just everything stopped. So we're working with the city right now to try and get EDA CARES Act funding to do exactly what you're talking about, to help restore public confidence as soon as it's safe to go back. The problem is the EDA opened up funding for DMOs, destination marketing organizations, that could facilitate exactly what you're talking about, but the funding is restricted to not allow certain forms of advertising. So just so you know, if anybody wants to talk about this with me, I'd love it. I'm working on a narrative right now, but it's an uphill battle because the EDA is not structured to do the kind of marketing that is required, certainly in this case. But so you know, we're out there working on it, and I'm happy to meet with anybody privately if anybody wants to talk. And thanks. Just wanted to let you know.
Thank you, Laura. Chris, you've got the last question of this session.
Thank you. I'll be quick. I know we're focusing on the businesses opening up, but my question to whoever can answer, has there been any outreach to the immediate area for these businesses, the boarding cares, the halfway houses that are in our immediate area? There's 14 within a 1 mile radius of my boutique. And a lot of those people that reside in there are anywhere from 6 to 20 persons. And a lot of them have been my customers. And I wanted to know, because a lot of them have mental health issues, has anyone reached out to them about protocol, safety, and just keeping them updated on what's going on? Because I did ride downtown last week because unfortunately someone graffitied urban kiosks. So I had to go and tend to that. And I saw a lot of people that have mental issues that I know live in the boarding cares, just walking around like nothing's ever happened. So have they been serviced an opportunity of knowing what's going on? Because I know there's a lot of big names that have, I don't know if her name is Nellie. Nellie is one of the houses that's on, she has 3 homes, I think on 10th or 11th Street, where they're boarding cares. Has anybody reached out? Do you know, Lee, if anybody's reached out to those homes or those facilities?
And I don't know off the top of my head. I know the county's safety net services that, you know, would monitor and regulate those facilities. They've been doing kind of outreach in general on the public health order and shelter in place. So I'd like to believe that yes, they have, but I wouldn't have any confirmation. But I do know their safety net systems have been doing a lot of outreach to go over whether it's nursing homes or those type of facilities, the regulatory environment they're in now.
Thank you.
Cash, you're on mute, Cash.
Sorry about that. We're going to get into wrapping this up. And at this time, if anyone has any announcements related to this task force, please feel free to share. I'll start off with one. We have a survey that needs to be shared with as many of your colleagues and fellow business owners as you can. The more information we can get back to the D3 staff, the better and more nuanced their response can be. So you should have access to that link in some of the most recent communications. But if you don't, let us know in the chats or comments, and we'll make sure Christina or one of us gets that to you. But do what you can to get that link out. And if any of you have any other announcements, now's the time.
I have an announcement, if that's okay. It was mentioned in the chat, but because so many of the questions and comments were related to it, Brenda and I just want to bring forward that within our Arts and Special Events Committee today, we discussed a public awareness campaign concept called Safely Social San Jose. To execute on it requires leadership from both the city and county health departments, and working with Team San Jose and Downtown Association as far as, I mean, a lot of us had questions around communications about how safe is it that businesses are open. And I think this initiative could probably fit in with that. So just letting you know that idea and the concept is out there, and we're trying to figure out how to make it cross-sector as well as across the county and city disciplines. So if you're doing any sort of promotions that way, please reach out to me or Brendan.
I've got an announcement. And this ties along the lines of what in a conversation where it's been today. I am now participating in another task force called Health and Equity Task Force. It's with nonprofit health partners here in the county, and a lot of them that serve our minority and non-English speaking communities. And in fact, the consistent concern that I'm hearing across the board is a lack of coordination and partnership, where these organizations are feeling as though that, like what Brendan was talking about, they have an opportunity. We have an opportunity here to help provide insight and input as some of this order is being drawn out, and more importantly, the communication around it. And that has not been happening. And one of the discussions that came up was, well, how do we ensure we can have a voice or a seat at the table? And the ironic thought was that, well, at the moment there isn't a table. It's really been a siloed set of decisions happening in a really narrow context through the county health official. So I'm glad to hear that Supervisor Chavez is beginning to say, hey, how can she host some community hearings? But I think there really needs to be something more robust than that. People are creating their own tables, like us with this task force, like the mayor with his task force, like this health and equity task force. And I think that what I'm going to try to do is create a collective message that maybe all of us can sign on to, some form of communication directly to the county supervisors, because the county health official is appointed by the county board of supervisors. And ultimately, even though they don't have to approve her orders are her orders, they do have oversight over her. They have the ability to hire and fire the county health official. And so it is incumbent upon them, if they feel that the table is not broad enough and there's not enough communication coming in and out, that they can ask that of the county health official. And so I think that it's important that we actually send some unified messages that I'm hearing from across the different sectors. I'll bring that back to the task force maybe next week, and certainly from now till then. Now, I think that Scott said that Cindy will be hosting these over the next 10 days. So hopefully a number of you are able to participate when we get that info out. So then that way they're hearing this directly from your voices as well.
Okay. Without seeing any further announcements, we'll adjourn this meeting. Thank you to everyone who participated today. Please remember the next meeting is next week, Wednesday, so 1 week from today, June 3rd, from 1 p.m. to 2:30 p.m. Stay safe.
Can we give a round of applause for Wisa and Cash? Sorry, for doing a great job on co-hosting the first meeting. Thank you, guys.
Thank you to you all. It was great to hear everybody's voices and see your very active chat over here. So thank you, and the meeting is adjourned. See you all next week. And thank you to our speakers who are already gone. You guys.
Thanks, Cash. Thanks.